Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Thank you so much for the support coming from your side, particularly after the last video I made where I was feeling a bit depressed. It sincerely helped to know that there are a lot of you who feel the way I do, and I'm glad to hear that you appreciate my honesty. Anyway, as I said, welcome back, and thank you for being here. We were still talking about Meghan's memory loss when it came to her cooperation with Finding Freedom and its authors. We were still laughing at her for her silly, childish, half-baked apology to the court, and we are still wondering whether those judges will have the integrity and the balls to allow the case between Meghan and ANL to go to trial and ultimately charge her with perjury. When, guess what? While we were speculating as to when Meghan will finally get her comeuppance and pay a little for her many lies, old Harry issued a statement on Archwell and calls misinformation on social media a humanitarian crisis. I nearly choked. The King and Queen of the land of misinformation calls misinformation a humanitarian crisis? Really? It is hilarious. Well, one thing is for sure, Harry and Meghan's lying certainly has my blood pressure up, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So I'm now convinced that Harry has lost his marbles and is even less intelligent than we thought. Or perhaps him and his wife thinks if they add the word humanitarian to anything, it'll make it sound better, sound more important. It appears to me as if they recycle buzzwords. This month it is racism, next month it is feminism, then humanitarianism, and so they ism along until they run out of buzzwords and then they start all over again. They are a joke. Well, at least I had a bit of a giggle when I read that singer Peter Andre wrote in his column. I've always stuck up for them, but I do think some of the choices they made are not great. And then he goes on to say, many are saying it is starting to wear thin. Oh my gosh, when your fans are starting to say your stunts are starting to wear thin, then you should know it's time to pack up your guitar and go home. Anyway, I have not as yet got to watch the BBC's The Princes and the Press, so at this stage I'm making observations from what I read in the press. There are a couple of comments in the various articles which really stood out to me. So instead of talking about the program itself, I'm going to address some of the comments made during and after the program. The first thing which stood out to me was a comment by Victoria Murphy when she mentioned how William and Harry's relationship with the media manifested in different ways as they grew older. Well, in a way, we need to take a step back and dissect this. Harry is being portrayed as having hatred for the media. We even had him talking about how every flash, every click affected him, remember? And then we have William, who appears to take things in his stride. Well, I don't think there's much truth in either one of these portrayals. I think the difference is that we have seen Harry behaving badly towards the press. We have heard him bad mouthing the press. And of course, it got worse once he had Meghan whispering in his ear. On the other hand, the worst reaction we got from William was the statement he read after the Bashir investigation and when he shot at a reporter after the Oprah interview, no, we are not, when asked whether the royal family was racist. Now, this tells me absolutely nothing about the prince's relationship with the press, but it tells me a lot about the men these two had turned out to be. Harry, the one who suffers from stunted emotional growth and who throws a tantrum when things do not go his way, and William, who had to grow up to shoulder the responsibility of being a future heir to the throne, and buffer for Harry with a mother who died too early and an emotionally absent father. However, when we look at the flip side of the coin, we find that it is William who appears more reserved in his relationship with the press, and Harry who seems to seek them out, and who has no qualms about talking about his personal feelings, mental and emotional well being, etc. All things which are very personal and very private. So it is my humble opinion, which I am backing up with receipts, mind you, that Harry does not hate the press. They may prove to be an inconvenience to him, particularly when they pop up somewhere where they do not want them to be or say something they do not want them to say. But otherwise, I think Harry, as dim as he may be or may not be, is a sly fox and knows how to manipulate everybody. Regardless of the inconvenience the press may be at times, I think Harry knows that the more he pretends to hate the press and the more he pretends to run and hide, the bigger the chase becomes and the more desirable those pictures, etc., will be. And I think this is something Meghan taught him, even though it may have been something he unknowingly did in the past. It is definitely something him and Meghan are, however, now doing knowingly and with purpose. From a young age, Harry, as well as William, had been taught how to use the press to benefit their charities and causes, and have been doing so. If I am to judge on what I have seen with my own eyes and not by what I'm told at all, I would say that both William and Harry have a mistrust of the press, but that William may have more of a mistrust than Harry, but that William is dealing with it in a more mature way. William does not rant and rave or open cases against unknown and likely non-existing photographers like his brother, etc., etc. Or so I thought, but we'll get to that later. Okay, and then there's a lot being said about Omid Scobie and Jenny Ifa from Shillings being on this BBC documentary. I am about as sick and tired of Omid Scobie's boring rhetoric as I am of the Harkles themselves. As always, and likely a million times before, Omid Scobie's had to refer to the underlying racist tones. Oh, and he referred to himself as the only mixed race royal reporter, which is obviously not true. And it was actually so funny because Roya Nika of the Sunday Times appear in the very same program. And this, of course, makes Amit Scabies look like a complete fool, which of course he is. I would guess Scabies will take a leaf out of his Mistress Cruella de Montecito's book and claim memory loss, as he also happened to forget that the Press Association's royal correspondent is indeed black. Anyway, Scabies did give a half-hearted retort by saying that we should all know that he did this interview in 2020. Anyway, Of course, the Shillings lawyer had little more to contribute than saying the stories about Meghan's bullying of staff were false, etc., etc. And, well, I guess she also gave this interview in 2020 because there had been so much coming out this year and from other sources painting Meghan as difficult to work for and of bullying and narcissistic behavior that it will be very hard to defend her in public on that score now at the end of 2021. As far as Omit's claim that a lot of the negative press Harry and Meghan got leaked from the other royal households, well, one can dispute it or not. Personally, I won't even go there or argue about it and think that it is very possible. But I think it is due to the human condition and not an intentional hate campaign set up by the other royals, as amid scabies is trying to make it sound like. I don't think for 1 minute that William takes time out of his busy day to tell a footman or a cook or a gardener what they should leak to the media outlet on any given day. I just do not see this happening, not in any of the households, and not on that petty, ridiculous scale. But people talk. They talk to their husbands and wives, they talk to their hairdressers and barmen, and stories spread, some true and some not. And some may even start out by being 100% true, but by the time it gets to the media or social media, each person it passed through had added their own spin to the story, and thus the final story may differ slightly, or, as William puts it, may even be exaggerated. I can actually bear testimony to this as I myself have heard stories and received information from someone who knows someone who knows someone who works in Kensington Palace or Buckingham Palace or Clarence House, or someone whose uncle is a bishop in the Church of England, or someone related to someone who worked for the Harkles or one of their friends, etc., etc. The royals and the Harkles can have all the NDAs in place, but no one is deaf, dumb, or blind, and for as long as humans shall roam this earth, people will gossip, and some gossip will fall by the wayside, and others will turn out to be more serious. The point I'm trying to make is that overall, the press will be careful with allegations for legal reasons, as we are all so proud of saying. Therefore, you will find that the press do not land themselves in court as often as one would expect, and that is because they usually have some kind of receipt to back up the main gist of their story, and hence their opinion may be wrong, or the spin they put on a story may be biased, but very seldom will you find that there is no basis for an article. When that happens, as it does sometimes, there will be a court case. And that brings me back to how this BBC documentary is being handled by the royal family. Having read the articles and having seen clips of this BBC documentary, I actually find the royal family's reaction a bit over the top. Yes, amid scabies and the Shillings lawyer got a few words in, but what they had to say was actually a little ridiculous and actually made them look ridiculous. Just consider the irony of Scobie claiming that the royal households were briefing the press versus the fact that it is now court record that Meghan Markle collaborated with the Finding Freedom book. Can you guys see how ridiculous this whole thing made him look? Again, my story, as explained in my last video of the Barbie doll in the hand, applies here. No matter what Omid Scobie or this lawyer now says, the evidence of straight out lying and bad behavior by Meghan and Harry are there for all of us to see. Up to 20 provable lies in the Oprah interview, to name but one example. Meghan having to admit to lying to a court of law being yet another. So, whether these two interviews were taped in 2020 or not, their inclusion in this program made them look ridiculous. And it's not true at all that the royal family side was not represented on the program. Dan Witten spoke out, Camilla Tominey spoke out, Robert Jobson spoke out. Those are all legit royal reporters, part of the royal rota. So, in my opinion, I've found the narrative fairly mature and I found it a balanced discussion with empathy for the two brothers, reflecting on both sides of the coin. And I personally think the BBC did the royals a favour by not including them, as now no one can accuse them of influencing the narrative. They, the BBC, made the inclusion of scabies and the lawyer almost look desperate, as if there was no one else to speak out on behalf of the Harkles. However, out of anger and spite, because they were not consulted beforehand, it is now said that William had banned the BBC from screening a Christmas Carol concert, but that instead him and Catherine have decided that the charity fundraiser event hosted by Catherine will be screened by ITV, the very same ITV which bought the rights to the Oprah interview, and the very same ITV Chris Shaw and Tom Bradby work for. How on earth does this make any sense whatsoever? How is William banning or threatening to ban the BBC from screening future events any different from Harry and Meghan telling UK tabloids they will no longer deal with them? My dear friends, I adore William and Catherine, and I personally think they are currently the monarchy's only hope for future survival, which is my opinion, of course, but I fear for William. I truly do. He appears to be a little hot headed, although a lot more level headed than his brother. It is clear to me that he either does not always think things through or is being influenced by others, along with allowing his own temper to influence his decisions. I have warned you time and time again that no matter where my loyalties lie, I shall always be fair, because by being fair, you maintain credibility and people will continue to believe you. And therefore, I also need to point out that at this point of where the royals as a family and as an institution stand with the public, the press, their own internal dynamics, etc., I would suggest they weigh any and every statement they make publicly against their own conduct first. As much as I absolutely hate to say it, but by Kensington Palace and Clarence House openly calling for a free, responsible, and open press, they need to perhaps revise their own actions of late, which made the headlines and which were not exaggerated or false, and where one can easily turn around and accuse the royal family of not exactly being responsible and open. I mean, there are things like the Queen secretly lobbying Scottish ministers for climate law exemption, and then there's another headline: Britain's royals used obscure legal procedure to hide distant relatives' wills. Again, do you guys see the hypocrisy of asking and expecting others to be responsible and open when you yourself operate in secret. Well, my dears, like I said, I have read what I could about the documentary, and the second part is not out yet. But it is my opinion that William and Harry are actually being treated as fairly as possible. And for once, for a change, and what I would consider to be an absolute miracle, the Sussexes have not responded to the documentary. And in my humble opinion, neither should Kensington Palace or Clarence House have done. So far, I do not feel there was anything derogatory about the royals or William in part one, except for Scobie's vitriol. Nothing so far had been exaggerated, and therefore I cannot find anything William or Harry should run off to the court for. But if, in part two, or any other program in the future, something does crop up which is slanderous, then the best course of action would be to take the matter to court and sue the papers for slander or defamation. But to react by boycotting the media or taking opportunities away or banning them from events or screening events is not acceptable in my book. It is an abuse of power, and it is threatening the media into abeyance. And I do not agree with that, whether it comes from the Harkles, the Cambridges, or from Clarence House. And then lastly, why react so strongly to this documentary? But to date, no legal action had been taken against the BBC and Martin Bashir for the fraud he committed to get that interview with Diana. To date, no action has been taken against Netflix with regards to The Crown or Diana the Musical. I sincerely find this very strange, and I really wish William in particular could perhaps invest in a more mature, wise advisor, someone sharp with experience in the law and perhaps the media. Somehow I think there is currently something amiss within the royal family, and they desperately need a voice of reason within their ranks. Maybe a committee or just more than one person who can act as an advisory or just a sounding board before Charles and William release press statements, because at the moment they are not doing themselves any favors, and it really, really breaks my heart, as I've been hoping to live long enough to see a King William and his Queen Catherine on the throne. Okay, my dears, I hope you've enjoyed this. There's still a whole lot that I'm looking into, and I can't wait to get back to you guys. I've been without internet now for 2 days, so I couldn't get here sooner, but the internet's back on, so I'll see you soon. Until I do, please take good care of yourselves. Bye.